Greetings, story lovers. Pull up a chair and open your ears, for I have a tale or two just waiting to unfold. Ever heard the saying, "Don't try this at home"? Well, today we're diving into a story about someone who probably should have listened to that advice. It's a tale that blurs the line between comic book fantasy and a very harsh reality, and it all starts with a 15-year-old boy and his love for the X-Men. Our story takes place back in 2014. Imagine being a teenager, completely captivated by the world of superheroes. You're watching movies like X-Men Origins, Wolverine, seeing these incredible characters with powers beyond human imagination. For most of us, that's where it ends. We might buy a t-shirt, maybe even try to mimic a cool move in front of the mirror. But for one boy, this fascination went a step further, into a territory that is both shocking and a little bit sad. He was particularly drawn to a character with a unique ability. It wasn't Wolverine, but another mutant from the X-Men universe. And he came up with a plan, a deeply flawed and dangerous plan, to gain similar powers for himself. His method? He decided to use liquid mercury. Now, for those who don't know, liquid mercury is that silvery stuff you might see in old school thermometers or blood pressure cuffs, which are also called sphygmomanometers. It's a heavy metal, and it is famously toxic. We're taught from a young age not to touch it, not to mess with it, and definitely not to let it get inside our bodies. But this young man, fueled by a desire to be extraordinary, ignored all the warnings. He got his hands on a thermometer and a sphygmomanometer, broke them open and extracted the liquid mercury. Then, on at least 3 separate occasions, he used a syringe to inject the shimmering metal directly into his left forearm. He truly believed that this act, this infusion of a foreign substance, would somehow rewrite his own biology and grant him the superpowers he so desperately wanted. He was trying to become a real-life X-Man. For a while, nothing seemed to happen. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. He went about his life, perhaps waiting for the day he'd wake up with newfound abilities. But instead of developing powers, something much more sinister started to occur. Large, painful ulcers formed on his forearm. These weren't just simple cuts or sores, they were deep, non-healing wounds. His body was reacting to the foreign invader, but not in the way he'd hoped. The tissue was dying. The mercury, trapped under his skin, was causing severe localized damage. Eventually, the pain and the state of his arm became too much to hide or ignore, and he was taken to see a doctor. The medical team was, to put it mildly, stunned. This was not a typical case. When they learned what he had done, their first concern was systemic poisoning. Mercury can travel through the bloodstream and wreak havoc on the nervous system, kidneys, and other vital organs. It can be fatal. They immediately ran a series of blood tests, bracing for the worst, but incredibly, the results were almost miraculous. While the mercury was causing extreme damage to his arm, very little of it had actually entered his bloodstream. The heavy metal had mostly remained contained within the muscle and tissue where he had injected it. He had, by some stroke of luck, avoided widespread, life-threatening poisoning. But his arm was still in serious trouble. The only solution was surgery. A team of surgeons had to carefully go in and remove every last droplet of the toxic metal. It was a delicate procedure. They also had to cut away all the dead and damaged tissue that surrounded the injection sites, a process called debridement. It was a graphic and painful consequence for a young boy's fantasy. After the surgery, he began the long process of recovery. The physical wounds would heal, leaving scars, but the doctors were just as concerned about his mental state. Why would a seemingly normal teenager do something so extreme? He was sent for a full psychiatric evaluation. The clinicians talked to him, trying to understand his thought process. They looked for signs of any underlying mental illness, psychosis, or cognitive impairment that might explain his actions. And what they found was just as surprising as his blood test results. They concluded that he had no diagnosable psychiatric disorder. He wasn't delusional in the clinical sense. He was just a kid who had a profound inability to distinguish between the fiction he loved and the reality he lived in. During their conversations, another incredible detail emerged. This wasn't the first time he'd tried to gain superpowers. Before his mercury experiment, he had been a huge fan of another hero, Spider-Man, and in a stunningly literal interpretation of the origin story, he had actively sought out spiders and allowed them to bite him, hoping that one of them would be radioactive and turn him into the friendly neighborhood wall crawler. Think about that for a second. Most of us run away from spiders. He was actively encouraging them to bite him. This pattern of behavior showed a deep-seated desire to escape the ordinary, to become something more, something special, just like the heroes he saw on screen. His case was so unusual that it was written up in medical journals as a cautionary tale. It serves as a stark, wild reminder of the power of media and the impressionability of a young mind. We consume stories of superheroes, of magic, of people who can fly and bend steel. These stories are meant to inspire us, to entertain us, and to give us hope. But they are, at the end of the day, fiction. The boy in our story learned this lesson in the most brutal way possible. He didn't gain any powers. Instead, he was left with permanent scars and a medical file that reads like a comic book plot gone horribly wrong. He survives, thankfully, but his story highlights a danger we don't often talk about. The danger of believing too much. It's a fine line to walk. We want our kids to have imagination, to dream big, to believe they can do anything. But it's crucial that they also understand the rules of the world we actually live in. In our world, mercury is a poison, not a superpower serum. Spider bites give you an itchy rash, not the ability to climb walls. This case is a fascinating look into human psychology, the allure of fantasy, and the painful consequences when that allure becomes an obsession. It's a reminder to all of us to enjoy our fictional worlds, to get lost in them for a while, but to always remember to come back to reality. The real world might not have superheroes, but it's the only one we've got. So the next time you watch a superhero movie and think, wow, I wish I could do that, just remember this story. Admire the heroes. Be inspired by their courage and selflessness. But please, please don't try to replicate their origin stories. It never ends well. Thanks for watching and sticking with us through this incredible story. Every story has its end, but another is waiting just up here. And if you seek more tales, be sure to subscribe below.